Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for all of your wonderful postings on the discussion board. I really have enjoyed reading them, and I like the dynamism with which you respond to each other. I know some of you know each other from other classes. I don't know many of you, but I know a few of you. But it's nice to see that interaction and how we really seem to have become a community together. I'm enjoying that. Your draft proposals and bibliographies are due on October 3rd, which is when I'm posting this, so I guess I should say. They're due today. Really, even if it's not perfect, even if it is, you think, an embarrassment, send me what you have. And I can give you some feedback that might help you work it up better. I mean, that's really what this stage is for me to just give you some good feedback. So some of you have come to talk to me, some of you have emailed me, but even if you haven't, just, send me. Don't be afraid. Just send me what you have. So this week we're reading 3 chapters in Between Memory and Hope. Two of the essays are by Patrick Regan. Patrick is a Benedictine. He's the former abbot of St. Joseph's Abbey in Louisiana. It's right near New Orleans. It's across the Lake Pontchartrain from New Orleans. So he's a former abbot, retired abbot of that monastery. And he was also president of the Swiss American congregation. The Benedictines are divided into different congregations in the United States and throughout the world. And some belong to the Swiss American congregation, and Patrick was that president of theirs. And then he taught at Sant Anselmo in Rome, which is the Benedictine college university, has a renowned liturgy program. And he taught there for a number of years and is now retired from there. He's a very energetic retiree. He taught this summer at the University of Notre Dame. So of all the people in the book, I might know Patrick Regan the best. I know everybody who has an essay in this book. They're all colleagues of mine in the North American Academy of Liturgy, or Societas Liturgica. So Patrick and Bob Taft, I know both of them well, but everybody I know. Patrick has a book that's out more recently. It's called Advent to Pentecost. I put the book cover onto the campus guides for you to see it. And he compares the seasons in the current Roman Missal, 3rd edition of the Roman Missal, to the extraordinary form. So that's the 62 rite, and he takes each of the rites and each of the seasons and presents both the way it is today and the way it is in the extraordinary form. Some Catholics have permission to celebrate their rituals in the extraordinary form. It makes a big difference, because that form didn't have the lectionary that we have, doesn't have the ceremonies that we have, and so it shapes a different kind of believer. But I'm pleased with this book. I was one of the people who got to read the manuscript and write a blurb for it, and actually mine is on the back of the book. Patrick Regan's Advent to Pentecost is destined to become a classic in the fields of liturgiology and pastoral theology. And that's just a sentence out of the longer description that's printed in the front of the book. So I'm pleased to have been asked. I'm pleased with the company that I have there. And I still stand by everything I wrote in the cover to that book. I hope you appreciate the way in which Chapter 8 in particular is organized. Patrick is a very organized thinker. So you have stage 1 and stage 2. And you'd think in, looking at that, oh, well, they must be, divided equally, and they're not really. Stage 1 is a very early developmental stage, and it goes from the 4th century, so once Christianity is legalized, to the early 5th century. And stage 2 goes from the late 5th century all the way to 1969. So, there's 1,500 years. So 100 years versus 1,500 years is not exactly balanced. Leo the Great, who is the kind of the fulcrum that's used, his dates are about 400 to 461. And so I know you can Google all of these people in terms that you don't understand. But he's often the turning point. So we get 2 forms of the Triduum. We get a Lent of different lengths, which you might find very surprising. And perhaps the late appearance of Ash Wednesday will also intrigue you. Also pay attention to the link between these two times. It's not only the Triduum that changes shape. It's also some other sacraments. So in the first period, or the first stage, really adult baptism is the norm. And by the time you get into the second, what Patrick is calling the second stage, infant baptism is coming more and more to the fore. And that kind of influences the impact on the approach to Lent, Holy Week, the Easter season. And the other thing is that public penance, canonical penance, was very much the way in which reconciliation took form in the first period. And by the time you get into the second period, tariff penance, or this auricular penance, auricular confession, is beginning to take shape. And soon, public penance will just go away completely. And again, that has an impact on how Lent is understood and how the Easter celebrations take shape. So do pay attention to that. The modern era begins in 1969, but immediately preceding that, in 1966, Pope Paul VI, lifted the obligation to fast on the days of Lent, except for Good Friday. So that 1966, I was 20 years old in 1966. So I never had to fast during Lent, just in time. But, so fasting in that day meant that you had one full meal, and you didn't eat meat, and the other, you had 2 lighter meals. But that's what people did every day during Lent. But Pope Paul VI lifted it and had this only on Good Friday. The bishops of the United States, however, decided that Ash Wednesday would also be a day of fast as well as abstinence. Abstinence means that we don't eat meat, but fast means we have only one meal, normal-sized meal, 2 other light meals during the day to maintain strength. And they were fasting, people between ages 21 and 59 were the ones obligated to do this. And others did it either because they were in the habit or they just wanted to be able to be part of it. But that changed things very significantly. And it changes the character of Lent. And Regan, on page 139, proposes a remedy. So question 4.1 asks you for your reaction to that remedy. What do you think about that? And really, when I ask you for your personal reaction, or I mean that, really, what are you thinking? It's not a right or wrong. even when I ask you about your experience, there's not a right or wrong to your experience. You don't have to quote any other writers. It's okay just to give me your experience. Chapter 9, also by Patrick, is about veneration of the cross. And again, it might surprise you where this originated and its late development, and that it's a cross, not a crucifix, and the difference that makes. In the parish where I lived for a number of years, Our Lady of Mercy in Forest Hills, our processional cross had two sides. It had one, and it had bells on it. So one side had no corpus, and the other side had a corpus. And when Eucharist was being celebrated, there was no corpus on the cross. And when after Mass, they would turn the cross around, and so the corpus was there if people wanted to have that for prayer. And it was controversial. Perhaps it hadn't been well explained, or perhaps we just really don't get the understanding of the cross. And that's really something very important, that we understand that especially when we talk about veneration, we're not really venerating. We call it the veneration of the cross, but we're not venerating the cross. We're venerating the risen Christ, of whom the cross is a symbol. And that's why it's important there not be the corpus on the cross, because he's risen. So there's this whole approach to piety of this appreciation, understanding of the risen Christ, virtues crucifix as kind of an instrument of torture. So I'm a Sister of Mercy, and our religious symbol is a cross that doesn't have a corpus on it, but has sort of a place on it that we understand is our place on the cross as well. That's just not written down somewhere. It's just a understanding of the spirituality of how this came to be, and came to be our religious symbol we wear. Another book that I recommend, and I also put this image on Campus Guides, is by Paul Turner, Glory in the Cross. And this is the subtitle is Holy Week in the 3rd edition of the Roman Missal. So the essays that you're reading were all written before the 3rd edition of the Roman Missal was even imagined. But Paul is a very fine theologian, and he goes through all of the celebrations of Holy Week, and really does an excellent job in speaking about the veneration of the cross as well. So especially those of you who are involved in parish programs, it's a book that you might want to invest in. It's really very fine. And then there's a question about your personal reflection, personal reflection, to all of that development of this the chapter on veneration of the cross. And then the third essay in this week is chapter 10, which is the essay by Bob Taft about Byzantine Holy Week, which is very different from what we have experienced. And although it's not different in that it's a little confusing about how it developed historically, but it's very, very different. In looking at the veneration of the cross, the chants that were sung in ancient times are still the chants that we sing today. Behold the wood of the cross on which hung the salvation of our world. Come, let us adore. They've been singing that since the 4th century. The Byzantine, because it's so different from us, we didn't, most of us were not in the Byzantine tradition, so we haven't been raised in those chants, so we don't hear that echo the way we do in some of the chants that are mentioned in the Regan essay. So the third question on the discussion board this week is an optional one. You don't have to, write your response to the Byzantine approach to Holy Week, although you might want to. You don't lose anything by not. It is purely optional if you want to respond to that, okay? And as usual, there's a space there for you to post questions that you might have regarding the unit. There were no questions this week, but I check. And then do pay attention to the course outline. There's another break next week. So you have, Columbus Day, and I know that there are midterms. You might be having midterms in your other courses coming up. So we'll take just a little breather next week as well. So let me know if you have any questions, problems, and I'll try to address them for you. Otherwise, have a good week and enjoy this reading that really is, I think, very interesting reading this week. Bye.